Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner, and Conquer the Gauntlet Pro, Evan Preparis. And joining me for another episode, I don't know how many this is in a row, but it is a lot. Brenna Calvert, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm actually laughing because, yes, it's been a few in a row, so let's keep going.
Well, this is actually the second podcast we're recording. We're doubling down today because we're all in on podcasting.
It's a serious weekend, y'all.
So our guest today is Luc Labonte. Luc Labonte, we've had him on the podcast before. He's a nutritionist. I'm going to ask him to go over some of his bio, but he's got a bachelor's and a master's in nutrition or something like that. And so he works with all sorts of athletes from, pro athletes to amateur athletes to people just looking to lose weight. And then on top of that, Division I athletes. So Luc, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, now give us a little bit more of a rundown of your bio because I did a pretty poor job explaining all your qualifications.
Well, your abbreviated version was fairly accurate, so I'll try to keep it equally as abbreviated since I'm pretty long-winded. Bachelor's, master's in nutrition, registered licensed dietitian, worked at 2 Division I universities, so I worked at Kent State University, that is in Kent, Ohio, and I currently work at East Carolina University, or ECU, in Greenville, North Carolina. Like you mentioned, work with plenty of athletes on whatever level they're interested in, whether it's more of the recreational athletes, your semi-professional, or your competitive amateur athletes, however they prefer to be referred to as well as your Division I athletes through both of my positions. Also did inpatient acute care through University Hospitals of Cleveland. Did some work, on all different floors across hospital systems in Cleveland, which is a very interesting experience. I do not regret the experience I had in there, but I am definitely not an inpatient acute care person.
Nice. All right, well, it is good to have you on the podcast, Brenna.
I do have to add one more qualification that I've added recently, and we can explain later. Registered dietitian and magician is what this man is.
I like magic.
Yeah, magic with food, so we'll explain later.
So
thank you.
Brenna says that because she's been getting nutrition help from Luc, and on top of that, Luc is now the official nutritionist of the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro team. Woo-hoo. So you can expect to hear a lot of tips and information from him and stuff like that over the next year, along the Conquer the Gauntlet Facebook page and along the CTG Pro Team website. So for this episode, what we did something a little bit different. We decided to post the questions on the Strength and Speed page and ask people, what do you want to know about from a nutritionist? So we're going to run down some of the questions along with who asked them, and Luc's going to give an answer and kind of explain it, and we'll kind of discuss from there. So with it being, essentially the end of 2018, start of 2019, holiday parties, people like to go all in on them. Lots of drinking going on, especially around Christmas time and New Year's Eve. So first question is from AC Hell, who was at the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team weekend. His question is alcohol. Just kind of wants more information. Does it negatively affect performance? Can I still drink it and perform? Kind of what's the balance there?
That is a wonderful question, and I can tell you through working at 2 Division I universities with a reputation of being party schools, Kent State and ECU very much quote-unquote party schools, surprisingly our athletes managed to perform at pretty high levels despite, some alcoholic beverage consumption. There are some detriments to it. It may negatively impact motor skills, hydration status, aerobic performance, recovery. A lot of the information that, I'm quoting here is from the USOC or the U.S. Olympic Committee. Of course, most people are pretty familiar with alcohol being a diuretic, which may cause a loss of water and potentially water-soluble vitamins through excretory manner. So your onesie and your twosies. As well, it may lower your inhibitions and increase risk for dietary indiscretions, which means you might be a little bit more likely to eat some foods you might not normally eat.
Taco
and a
Bell.
little bit greater. Exactly. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, and I tell my students, I'm like, listen, I was a college student too, like I know how at 3 a.m. after a bender you're going to go out and grab some Taco Bell, but are those calories really being used effectively, and are they needed? Of course, alcohol is fairly dense in calories, 7 kcal per gram more precisely. I won't get more into thermodynamics like thermic effect of food or anything, but it may cause an increase in caloric intake, which is not necessarily nutrient dense. With that being said, those are some of the more specific drawbacks of it. There has been some research that has indicated some potential minor health benefits, but this is more associated between light to moderate drinking, not necessarily your binge drinking, which we see in a lot of, I guess you could say, students, athletes in general, and, the criteria for binge drinking isn't too crazy. For most people, if you're drinking 3 or more drinks in a short period of time, that would be considered binge drinking. And I mean,
that's a pretty low bar for most people.
Oh, I know, right? It's nuts. Like when you look through the data and you see like 3 drinks in an hour, and you're like, oh, well, that's not too hard to throw back 3 drinks in an hour when you're sitting at a bar, sitting at a party. I mean, that's super. I mean, not saying I'm a huge drinker or anything, but I'm actually a huge lightweight. I get made fun of for it all the time, but even in that respect, 3 drinks is not a whole lot. But anyhow, there are some potential health benefits. It may help reduce risk of, let's say, myocardial infarction or heart attack, ischemic stroke, peripheral vascular disease, death from all cardiovascular causes. But a lot of this data is correlational, and, there's some theories about it regarding, those who drink light to moderately also have different lifestyle behaviors that may complicate that interpretation. But with that being said, if an athlete wants to perform at a high level, they can still consume alcohol. They just have to, understand moderation. If we're talking daily drinking for men, nowhere or nothing more than 1 to 2 drinks daily. For women, no more than 1 drink daily. And these are just general basic guidelines. Of course, there's, like, for example, you have let's say a lineman, that weighs 350 pounds, obviously going to outdrink, OCR runner that weighs 175 pounds. But, there's a little bit of leeway with there depending on athlete weight and size. But if I had to give like a final verdict, I would say, it can be incorporated in your diet as long as your nutritional intake is appropriate to meet your energy needs, and it is not sacrificing any, I guess you could say, let me put it this way, like, so you're prioritizing the right foods instead of alcohol, and when you're consuming alcohol, you're being mindful that you also have to stay hydrated. That's also very important. If we're talking about being inside of an adaptive training phase, or if you're getting close to competition, I would avoid or limit consumption within 48 hours if possible. So let's say if you have a race on Saturday, I probably would not be drinking on Thursday or Friday. Limit that as much as possible.
So I want to interrupt with you saying that right there. I personally, and then I've seen just recently on an Instagram story, Nicole Miracle had posted and was like one of those Instagram stories, asked me a question. And someone said, what do you do? What's your ritual pre-race night before? And she has stated, and we've seen on social media, and I too, a glass of wine the night before, because it kind of like calms your nerves, race jitters the night before. Mm-hmm. But again, is that completely against, for someone, a high-level athlete like Nicole or anybody else, she stays on her regimen, or anybody else, and then that kind of lessens the nerves at night. But is that going to be affected? Like, will her body react to that the next day, or another person if they just had 1 glass of wine pre-race
That's
night?
a great question. In honesty, I think 1 glass of wine is not going to make that very big of a detriment as long as you're maintaining good hydration, glycogen stores are full, you're prioritizing what you should be prioritizing, and, there's gives and takes, I guess you can say. If I have an athlete that says a glass of wine helps get me, my mind straight the night before. It helps me de-stress, helps me sleep, a little bit more appropriately. Even though it may disrupt sleep cycles, I don't foresee one glass of wine for most individuals really causing any negative detriment. But, sometimes I've heard of some guys, let's say, for example, like Tough Mudder, for example, definitely the days when I used to run Tough Mudder, it was, more camaraderie, more fun. And I remember having some buddies that would go out the night before and have like 3, 4, 5, 6 drinks and then, go like, hey, let's run 12 miles and do 20 obstacles tomorrow. But, and then again, we're talking about people who are at that sort of race. They're probably not trying to perform for winning or for maximal sports capacity. So, and honestly, I think it's individual, but I don't foresee one drink really compromising anything at that point. And, there's even like jokes, like I remember someone linked, talking about like whiskey and deadlifts, people, drinking alcohol before lifting sessions and things like that. I try to stick more closely to the data and what's suggested by gold standard like USOC. And then just kind of go more specifically case to case there. Like, in honesty, one drink's not really going to kill you, but, multiple drinks the night before may not be optimal.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, there's a large psychological effect there. If you're saying this helps relax me, or this, I drink a shot of whiskey, now I feel stronger. If you really believe that to be true, like, it's probably going to have an actual benefit. It's going to translate to the actual weights. For me personally, I just found it easier to see things in like a little more black and white, where it's like, well, most of the studies are saying alcohol is not helpful, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And to me, it's a math equation, right? Like, is my results at races more important to me than drinking, on a Saturday night? And for me, the answer is yes. And I don't regret that at all. And I see it that way. I think there are some studies agree that like, red wine would help like vasodilation type stuff like that and heart health. But I don't know. I think you can get a lot of those benefits from other food sources and other products that have fewer negative side effects.
Exactly.
Like I like to compare it to, Lucky Charms, right? Like Lucky Charms on the box is like fortified with vitamins. And it's like, well, yeah, it's got vitamins in there. It's also got a ton of sugar. Like, so maybe you should get your vitamins from someplace else and not consume all that sugar.
Well, and I can play devil's advocate to the alcohol thing and play both sides, because I can say, obviously I'm not promoting this or recommending it to anybody, but being a restaurant person, I drink heavier than probably most athletes. And there was a couple races. I would have a couple beers before most races, not going to lie. I do recall a race last year, or 2 years ago, I think. It was Little Rock, possibly CTG, that I won the race, but it was the post-dinner that someone was like, how did you, I don't understand how you manage that, because I saw you have 6 beers last night. And I'm not going to lie, I did do that. It's happened, but I wouldn't recommend it, because now working with you, Luke, I've come to the point where, I made a conscious effort in my brain to be like, all right, let's not drink for a week, see what happens. I raced, did good, and then I've had a couple drinks since then, but it's also because I went a week without it, my body's already switched to be like, oh, I don't really need that or want it. It wasn't doing anything for me. So it's one of those, like, if you have a habit, maybe just try and break it with alcohol per se. But I do think I'm, curious to my next race the night before. Am I going to want a glass of wine like I used to? Or, just not do it?
When it comes down to it, as much as research is going to indicate something, I always encourage people, not that I'm discounting research or anything, that always use yourself as an N=1 experiment, because there are, nutrition isn't that old of a field compared to others. I mean, modern nutrition has been around for maybe 100 years. And every day there's new research coming out. Some research contradicts previous research based on research models and methods and things like that. So I always say, you know what? Try something. If it works for you, then great, continue with it. Don't push that on someone else, because maybe their body's adapted in a different way. And also just make sure, I guess you could say, be mindful of the things that you're doing, like trying, like maybe drinking, 3 bottles before isn't necessarily going to be conducive if we can see, all the scientific evidence indicating something. But if you're like, hey, maybe a glass before, like you're saying, there's that psychological element to it. And then as well, I can say that the placebo effect is very strong. So, I mean, if someone thinks they perform better by having a glass of wine the night before, and that's something that they enjoy and makes them feel great about themselves, by all means, like, continue to do that. Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of athletes are very ceremonial, very superstitious. And if you find something that works for you, if you find that equation, like, continue with it. Roll with it. Maybe adapt it, change it a little bit here or there, depending on how you're feeling or what's being suggested by research, if you're willing to try and incorporate other elements. But if you find something that works for you, I always encourage people, go ahead, try it, do it. Because there's always two experts when I'm talking to people, because I might be an expert on subject matter, talking about certain things nutrition related, but that person is the expert in their own skin, because I'm never going to feel how they're feeling. I'm never going to understand if it's working, more from a subjective feeling as opposed to objective, because we can get objective markers for, body composition changes and things like that and health changes. But I think there's definitely important for, I think more of a partnership in clients in that respect.
I'm going to also add, I think I'm going to use a common term I've heard before. Some people are successful in spite of what they do, not because of what they do.
Oh, yeah.
Just because not everything in your life is 100% perfect to perform doesn't necessarily mean that, you might do something and that, that may not be the reason you're performing so well. It might be you happen to be a genetically gifted runner who's put in hundreds of miles of training. And you know what? That one glass of wine maybe doesn't affect you at all. Maybe it hurts you, 0.01%, which is you're still winning. You're still beating the field of women that you're chasing or that are chasing you, or men, whatever. So
exactly. And I mean, there's even research indicating that some people are more genetically adapted to metabolizing wine than others. Or not wine, just alcohol in general. So, if you're a fast alcohol metabolizer, you can probably go through drinks more quickly than your buddy who's a lightweight, like me, for example. Lightweight, don't drink a lot, but, 1 or 2 drinks is usually more than enough to get the, I guess you could say, the outcome, those feelings that most people are looking for from drinking.
I'm just going to go with I have a fast metabolism for alcohol, whether I do or not.
You're Irish, right?
Exactly. See, there you go. It's the ginger in me.
There you go.
I stopped drinking 2014 basically, and I had one beer when we were at the Guinness brewery in Ireland, and I was tipsy off one beer. I wasn't even done with my beer, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm really feeling it." I was like, "It's so embarrassing."
In your defense, it was a Guinness.
Yeah.
Grown man, half a beer, and he's done.
So. All right, let's keep moving. We got a lot of good questions. So this one's from one of our strength and speed athletes, James McVeigh. Has a monster deadlift. If anyone wants to go check that out on our website. But he asked, do masters male and female athletes need more protein than younger athletes?
That is an absolutely wonderful question. So I enjoyed answering this question. So there is some research that indicates that masters athletes may require a little bit more protein to facilitate muscle protein synthesis than younger athletes, although it's not 100% certain. There's not a ton of research in this area, but we have seen some as kind of indicated that they do require a little bit more specifically of, let's say, leucine, which is more associated with muscle protein synthesis. It's kind of like the trigger to start that reaction, I guess you could say. I won't get super into what it would look like. Sometimes I draw it out for clients and things like that. This is what it looks like. It kind of falls along action potential. But anyway, so they would need a little bit more of that stimulus to get the same. But I usually, when I'm talking with masters athletes, I don't necessarily always say eat more protein. I think that we should focus a little bit more on getting quality of protein, working on effective protein timing, because you're going to get more benefit from doing that than opposed to just, blankly increasing protein. So basically, long story short, without getting so into the science of it or whatnot, because I have paragraphs written out, we want to focus more on incorporating leucine-rich foods in certain increments. A lot of research has indicated that spacing meals approximately every 3 to 5 hours is going to be a little bit more advantageous for protein feedings than it would be every 1 or 2 hours, because some people will do like 6-7 meals a day, but in that circumstance you're not really going to get any more benefit from that as opposed to eating a little bit more protein dense meals. Again, if you're thinking more along the lines of like an action potential, there's kind of like a cool down period between activating that stimulus, reaching that threshold, and then before you can do it again. And again, that's research indicating a little bit more, 3 to 5 hours. And then consistent intake of protein, from what we've seen from some research, it'd be around 0.5 gram per kilogram per meal if you're using like a 4 meals daily model. And that'll come up to around 2 to 2.4 grams per kilogram daily. And again, focusing on leucine-rich foods, foods with high bioavailability, so things like animal-based foods, especially like milk products, animal meats. There are some vegetarian foods that are rich in leucine. Let's say, for example, like lentils. I absolutely love my lentils, and I'm like a spokesperson for lentils. But incorporating those foods in certain increments will also be a little bit more advantageous. Anyhow. Do you want me to go a little bit more into depth into it?
Talk about those lentils. I don't know anything about you and a spokesperson for lentils.
My clients always tease me because when I'm sitting down, like when I'm talking with my students and things like that in consultations, they're talking about like meal prep ideas and things like that. I'm like, you can make a pot full of lentil soup, and the thing is, it's dirt cheap, it is super quick, and it is very dense. 1 cup of lentils has approximately 20 grams protein, around 14 grams of fiber, very good source of dietary molybdenum, good source of leucine coming from it. I mean, like, just even if you just do lentils, not even lentil soup, you can make 7 cups of lentils for $1 in less than 30 minutes.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like, I look at from a cost-benefit perspective, a lot of my students and even a lot of my clients, they may not have a lot of experience cooking food, or they don't feel confident cooking food. I'm like, listen, you boil water and then you put lentils in a pot for 20, 25 minutes and you're good. Like, that's all you have to do.
Are you talking about me?
Oh, no. If anything, you have a lot more experience. Like you said, you had some experience inside the food industry. I mean, I hate to say it, like, I love my students. I love working at a Division I university. But the thing is, especially students nowadays, they have such poor confidence in cooking and such poor skill in cooking, and they don't necessarily prioritize it, or they don't see the value in cooking it. And oftentimes I have to talk about the benefits of it. This is what you can get when you're cooking at home. It's going to be cheaper. You're going to be able to make, more foods that are conducive towards your goals. You're going to make more healthy, nutritious foods because oftentimes, it's easier to stop and, get something at Chick-fil-A than it is go home and cook. But essentially, long story short, that's how I feel about lentils. I think they're awesome. I mean, I make 7 cups of lentils a week. I eat 7 cups of lentils a week, and I am not complaining about it.
Well, I always think that's funny what you're saying, that like nowadays it's just one of those things that I don't know if it's just a lifestyle change and everybody's so busy these days they don't take that time when like you cook with your kids and spend the time in the kitchen with showing them good foods and cooking habits and eating habits. And now it's just nowadays everybody's so busy they don't have time for it. So it's like, yeah, like you said, your college students probably these days didn't spend a whole lot of time baking and cooking and having fun. They did school and they missed all that.
Yeah, it's definitely sad. Like I tell all my students, I understand the boat that you're in. Like I jokingly tell them, I'm not old, but I jokingly tell them I'm old, but I'm not that old. I understand what it's like to go to college in this millennia and have all these pressures placed on you. And sometimes us telling them, exercise, sleep 8 hours a night, have healthy social life, be a straight A student, do volunteer work, be part of extracurriculars, and eat healthy foods and, make all your foods at home. Sometimes it's unrealistic in that circumstance, especially seeing that, hey, this is their first time being an adult, being exposed to real life. I mean, I know adults that can't even handle, all of that, and they're well out of college, and they had that adulting experience. But, sometimes just describing them, hey, this is going to be significantly more cost effective. You're going to be able to eat foods that work towards your goals. You're going to be able to prepare foods for a lifetime. And I think that's important too, because, looking in the future generations, even though I keep my clients' goals in mind, their immediate goals, I'm thinking, well, if I'm telling you to do something, it's likely going to be doing something that I would want you to do for the rest of your lifetime. I mean, let's say, for example, client comes in and they're like, I heard eating chicken, broccoli, and rice for every meal is great. Should I do that? This is just an example. I'm not telling anyone to eat chicken, broccoli, and rice for every meal. But the first thing I ask them,
I'll tell people to do that. I think that's a good idea.
Boring. Don't listen to him.
So I'm like, all right, person A, so you think that eating chicken, broccoli, and rice is going to be, something that you could do the rest of your life? And they're like, well, maybe not. I'm like, well, maybe we should work on habits that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. As opposed to working on all these small things, we look at big picture. I'm like, well, let's make sure that you're balancing your meals. Let's make sure that you're, using good cooking preparation. Let's make sure you're using great ingredients. Let's make sure there's variety in your diet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially, I believe in giving tools so that person can develop their own habits and their own skills through tools that I provide and education that I provide. They become more confident, and with that increase in confidence, comes an increase in efficacy and them actually following through and doing that, which will work towards their goals, I guess you can say.
Yeah, no, that's an absolute great answer. I mean, especially as we get into the new year, people are like, oh, well, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, so I'm going to go on this hardcore crash diet for the next 2 months, and I'm going to slim down, and then they do that, and then they immediately balloon back up because they haven't changed their lifestyle. They've shortly changed their eating habits, and sometimes gone on like a starvation diet to lose that weight. So,
oh yeah, and there's
say there.
Don't even get me into the potential health detriments of yo-yo dieting, crash dieting, because it's a nasty cycle. And I mean, I can understand why a lot of people that lose weight end up gaining the weight back. Just looking at some of the, let's say, physiology of it, it's nuts.
It's always those times. I wish New Year resolutions weren't what they are at like the gym, because you get all the people that are like, oh, this is my New Year's resolution. And then the gym's crazy, and then like by February or March, it's just done. It's like, please stop making health resolutions on New Year's because you think it's the cool thing to do, because most of you aren't going to stick to it. And it's just like an actual lifestyle change. That's why I feel like mine was kind of crazy timing to start working with you right before the holidays, but it's actually good timing, I think, better that way. But also pre-New Year's, it's not my resolution, and I'm just going to do it. But the New Year's resolution thing is just, it bugs me. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay. I used to be the cynical kind of person that, I would hate the gym got 3 times more populated. You couldn't get in the squat rack. And eventually I was like, Luke, you need to stop being like an a-hole, and you need to start, like lifting people up. If you see someone that's struggling in the gym or they don't know what they're doing, give them a little advice here or there, try to help them. And
they're trying, so
yeah.
It's like you give them props, for a month or two they're trying, so it's like you feel bad. I don't want to knock them down, but then I'll give you more props if you're there in June still.
Yeah, it's sad because, not to throw out numbers or anything, because I think if I throw out a number, it should be, educated number, but most of the people that do start during New Year's in general, like I would say at least 3/4 of them probably aren't going to carry through with their New Year's resolutions by the time summer comes. It's going to be, up until February, up until spring break, and then afterwards it's going to kind of fall off a little bit. But for some reason, New Year's is this magic time of the year where people, triple their motivation on anything. And really, I like that just because it's a good time of the year to get in new clients. I get so busy, but the great thing is I try to hold it. Yeah, that Christmas, like right after Christmas time, going to New Year's. Yeah, I mean, like, between Thanksgiving to Christmas isn't the best because people are like, oh God, I don't want to, have someone tell me what I should be doing right now. But, there is a little bit of magic in New Year's. That motivation goes up. So hopefully if people make those choices and make New Year's resolutions, I salute them for, making goals towards prioritizing their health and taking steps forward. But, I also challenge them to try to make those resolutions year-long and a lifetime habit.
Yeah, I love that. I always say, if it's important enough for you to change your life about it, why are you waiting to a magical date on the calendar? Why are you waiting until January 1st? Why don't you do it on Tuesday? Or, you know, like what are we waiting for? So, and then the other thing I'll add in, I was talking to one of my friends who, you know, who's more of an OCR guy, doesn't really go to the gym per se, and mentioned like being self-conscious at the gym. And I'll say, as someone who's been going to the gym for, I mean, years, right? Like, I don't know, 15 years regularly on a, you know, almost daily basis, I don't pay attention to how much other people are lifting. Like, I don't. You just don't look around. Like, the only people who are paying attention to how much other people are lifting are people that are self-conscious about themselves. So they're comparing themselves. Like, unless you're like a female crushing out deadlifts at like, you know, 315, then I'm going to probably start paying attention. But like, other than that, I don't look. Or if you're making like a lot of noise, right? Like if you're screaming while lifting weights, I'm going to look. And then be like, why are you screaming, you know, at curling, you know, 20-pound weights? But yeah, like, you know, it's same thing with a race. You know, people are like, oh, well, you know, I've heard people say like, I don't want to come in last. It's like, you know who knows who comes in last at a race? The person who comes in last and the person who comes in second to last. No one else looks. I've never looked at a race results to see who came in last because I don't care. You know, like, I'm not saying that like negatively, but it's like, you know, great job for getting out there and trying, you know, and it's just not a concern. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I use that same comparison. Like, if you're an OCR person who doesn't necessarily go to the gym, think about how many times you've looked at a race to figure out who came in last, and then also I use that as a comparison to like how often you go to the gym to see how much other people are lifting. You know? So
that's a good comparison.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna jump into some more.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into some more questions. Keep the podcast moving along. So Jared Rainier from JRun Fitness threw up a couple of softballs towards you. But they're actually not softballs, but they're actually good questions that I think some OCR athletes will be interested in. So his first one, fan favorite of OCR, beet juice. You know, his question is, should I use it? If so, how and when? Basically wants to know more information about beet juice. You know, with Juice Performer, you know, we're a fan of beet juice, but I know the, what's the one? Beet. Why am I drawing a blank?
Beet Elite.
Beet Elite. Everyone loves Beet Elite. Like, oh, without this Beet Elite, I wouldn't be able to finish my Spartan sprint. And it's like, well, I don't know. You might be you may want to give yourself more credit than that. But yeah, give us some information about beet juice and kind of beet supplements, and go from there.
Great question, and I do get this a lot. So a lot of people are probably aware that beet juice is a fantastic source of dietary nitrates. Or nitrates, rather, not nitrites. There's a difference between the two. Nitrates. So consumption of nitrates may facilitate conversion to NO, or nitric oxide, which is associated with improvements inside of aerobic performance, most notably from vasodilation and that potential reduction in oxygen costs of exercise. So there is some validity in this, but when we talk about, I guess you could say, dosage, oftentimes many products are underdosed, so I encourage a lot of consumers to be skeptical, because through research we've kind of determined that between 400 and 1,200 milligrams of dietary nitrate is appropriate for exercise performance. And, you know, of course, it's going to vary by the athlete, it's going to vary by the source. So the one thing is that a lot of people aren't aware of how much 400 to 1,200 milligrams of dietary nitrate can be. I mean, and I've even used myself as an N=1 experiment on this before. You know, that equivalent is 1 pound of fresh beetroot. So, like, that
seems aggressive.
Yeah, it's a pretty potent amount to get the clinically suggested benefits of it. And the thing is, beetroot, you know, you can get dietary nitrates from plenty of sources, but beetroot is generally the easiest source to tolerate, even though it may not be the most dense. But anyway, and then of course, you know, cold pressed juices are generally favored by many manufacturers because I haven't necessarily found any research to suggest this, but according to manufacturers, that cold press is a little bit more preferred. That way there's no heat involved in the processing of it, so there may not be any potential breakdown. From what I've seen is basically as long as you get those nitrates in really in whatever source, it could be cooked beets, it could be beetroot, you still get the benefits. But the thing is, like, the quantity needed to tolerate it oftentimes products may be underdosed. So definitely looking at a product and making sure that you're getting at least 400, if not more, milligrams of that nitrate. And, you know, using my experience, so I'm the kind of person where I try to simulate, if it worked inside of lab experiment, clinical experiment, I'm going to try to take the same solution, the same product, the same suggestions that they use from their methods. So I've kind of done that, and I kind of tinkered it a little bit. So, you know, during training, I found some benefit. It's not something that I use consistently. It's not something I use year-round, but I have done it in the past. But anyhow, so the one thing that I encourage people to do is first, you know, get a source that provides that much. And then if it already has carbohydrate in it, let's say, for example, you're using straight beetroot that's cold milled, I would make sure that you dilute it fairly well so that the solution is less than 6% carbohydrate to the total solution, or the solute is less than 6%. That way it can be more optimally absorbed and tolerated. Because, I mean, I tell people, all right, take 1,200 milligrams of dietary nitrate in a cup with 8 ounces of water, and it's gut-wrenching. It's rough. It's, you know, unless you get something, you know, that's a little bit more processed, a little bit more refined, you know, just doing straight beetroot, that's rough. But anyway, you know, if you are going that route, you know, dilute it, and I mean, it's going to be a pretty big solution. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, for an individual's needs, you're drinking, you know, 16 to 20 ounces of diluted beet juice. And I would encourage them to start sipping on it, you know, 60 through 120 minutes or an hour to 2 hours prior to onset of the exercise. But the thing is, I also encourage people, I'm like, why don't you just have a diet that's very rich in nitrates too, so you can get the same benefits without necessarily having to use a supplement that you may or may not tolerate. Because I found in my training, if it's a training situation, I can usually tolerate beet juice relatively well. Sometimes better than others, I'll say that much. But then if it's before a race situation, I know before races or if I'm doing very high intensity work, I can't tolerate whatsoever. I get a lot of GI distress, and I won't go too much more in depth into the symptoms I experience. But it's not great. So always, if you're going to do it and you plan on doing it before a race, always try to simulate race conditions before using it.
And you actually, what you said, something added a question I wanted to ask. Just kind of, you were speaking on cold pressed juices.
Mm-hmm.
To me, is it just this like a health trend? I remember a while ago, it was like everybody was buying a juicer and juicing their own vegetables and fruits. And it's like, okay, cool, everybody's being healthy, making these juices, getting all these nutrients they weren't getting, and had no idea that celery and carrots and kale mixed together tasted good and delicious.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
That was a bad example. I don't know. Anyways, but like, so I got a juicer, but now all of a sudden it's like, juicing's not good enough. Now you got to get cold pressed, because when you're juicing, you're basically just like beating the fruit or the vegetable and not getting the nutrients. Is that something that is all over time has been researched, that it's just evolving, or is this just like a trend that got people to buy juicers and then now like you go for the cold press stuff? Because I mean, to me it's like, okay, I got a juicer, but now I'm being told that juicing's not good enough, I need to get cold press, and it's like, well, why? I don't.
In honesty, like, if from what I've read, and of course this isn't gonna be like 100% accurate to every situation, from what I've read, cold pressed for general health benefit is not necessarily absolutely needed. I mean, in reality, the only big difference, and this even goes a little bit into a question that we were asked, so I'll just kind of loop them in together. I mean, with juicing, you may lose some of the nutrients associated with that if you're, you know, just getting rid of the outside of it. So like the exterior, closer to the exterior, you might lose fiber, you might lose some nutrients that naturally lie closer to that exterior. So I mean, there's some loss there. Excessive heat may indicate marginal breakdown of certain heat-sensitive nutrients, but I mean, it's nothing that, you know, oh no, I cooked this, or oh no, I used a juicer that got a little warm, like my nutrients are all gone, this is a waste. Like, please don't feel like that. I think a lot of it is marketing trends and, you know, just minor percentages and differences. But, you know, like, I usually ask my clients, you know, there's definitely a lot of health benefits to getting in plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, well, do you prefer eating or drinking them? And if you prefer drinking them, are you willing to pay for the convenience and potential loss, like the edible portion of what you're getting, loss in money and loss in nutrition with that? I mean, green juices and just juicing in general is not a bad substitution, especially for those who have very, I guess, say, distinct food preferences. Like if I have a lot of clients that are like, I absolutely refuse to eat fruits and vegetables. I'm like, well, how do you feel about smoothies or juice or things like that? I mean, I guess it's just if you're willing to pay for convenience, and if you don't like eating them, go ahead. But personally, I like it.
That's why you're throwing spinach in my smoothies and stuff.
Bingo.
All right, I'm on to you.
She's catching on. She's like, it's not magic anymore.
Crap.
She's getting on to me.
So, going to keep rolling along the same topic. So, one of the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team sponsors, Juice Performer, does beet juice, but they also do cherry juice. So, Jared Renier also asked a follow-up question related to cherry juice. So, he basically wanted to know, should I use it, and kind of if so, when?
And we just talked about this, so I'm excited that this was a question.
Yeah, cherry juice is definitely a pretty hotly contested, I guess, say, supplement or product inside of sports nutrition. Because it has been clinically demonstrated to reduce blood markers consistent with inflammation. So there is validity there, but I always encourage people to think around what context for it to be used, because inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing. Inflammation, I guess you say, is a catalyst for improvements inside of exercise performances. We get to adapt through our body sensing inflammation in different areas through different mechanisms. So, it's appropriate for improving. You gotta, for, let's say, muscle tissue, for example, lifting weights, you have to break muscle down to build them back up. But that inflammation response is actually associated with building those muscles up stronger and larger if you're going more for hypertrophy. I mean, there's even, if you get in some very niche supplements used by some strength training athletes, some bodybuilding athletes, they use supplements that actually increase inflammation. That way their body can, recover from that and potentially recover even stronger. It might reduce time for recovery, but they might get a little bit more recovery benefit over a longer period of time. I haven't looked specifically in the research of it, but I am aware of those products out there. But what I can say is that, there's mixed research regarding usage of anti-inflammatory exogenous compounds, so things like cherry, vitamin E, vitamin C, during adaptation phases of training. So oftentimes, I had a lot of athletes that were using these products. I say that they can be beneficial under some circumstances. So I asked them, under what's their goal of taking it, under what circumstances are they taking it? Because basically, let's say a lot of research demonstrates, best practice for usage of 8 to 12 ounces twice a day if you're doing this 4 to 5 days prior to competition to facilitate recovery and so you can perform optimally during that event, or if you're using it for 2 to 3 days after that competition for recovery if desired. But the thing is, if you're doing adaptation training, especially that regarding muscular strength, muscular endurance, things like speed work where you're working more on not even necessarily the aerobic element, but a little bit more of the muscle end of that development, it's probably not going to be optimal because it might be a very small rate limiter on your gains in that circumstance. So, and I'll say, not that I'm telling to everyone to do as I do, but I'm one who believes in incorporating more anti-inflammatory foods during a tapering phase, going into a race and recovering from a race so I can start getting the training a little bit sooner. So under those circumstances, I think it's ideal for kind of like a daily supplement for people to use during adaptation phases of training. Probably not the most ideal.
Yeah, I think that was an absolutely great answer. Not all products and not all foods are good at all times of the day or times of the year, depending on your training season. An example is like some of the endurance fuels I use, right? Like high nutrition stuff. Like I wouldn't sit around my couch eating those because I'm not burning that type of calories and I don't need that type of fuel income. It's not meaning the food's bad for you. It's just like, that's not what I need right now. And
bad timing.
Bad timing, yeah.
Definitely circumstantial.
And, I definitely use the cherry juice that way. Like if I'm tapering for something, I increase my cherry juice intake. But if it's early, January, February, March, before I actually start racing, I'm not typically taking cherry juice because I want that, like you were saying, I want that inflammation to cause adaptation. Every time, my mom loves me, so she's always concerned about my health. So every time we do one of these like big races, I'm limping around afterwards and I look terrible. And she's like, take some ibuprofen. And I'm like, no, I refuse to take ibuprofen. It's going to limit my gains, my endurance gains, because I want that stress on my body, so my body knows how to deal with it and recover and adapt the next time. So I don't take ibuprofen unless I'm like injured and need to perform for a specific race. Like that's the only time I'll even take it. Period.
Well, and I love this question because of the fact, like Luke, working with you, I'm not knocking Juice Performer by any means because I love them. They're a great sponsor, a great product. But for those that don't know or say, I sought out your help to educate myself basically more so I can make better choices. But it was like I saw Juice Performer. I tried the cherry juice. I loved it. It tasted good. It says on the can it helps fight inflammation. So I was taking it and drinking it. Like after, a hard workout, I drink it because that's what I was just thinking. And then after talking with you, and it makes sense, like when you explain this. So your answer was awesome because I'm not saying don't, but you corrected me and like you don't need to drink it every day because like you said, you want that inflammation, but you also told me, hey, the week before the race, if you're gonna start taking that so that come race day, inflammation's done. And it's like, okay, cool. So definitely seek out the help from someone like you that has proper answers, and it's not against the product or company because again, they are selling and trying to make money off their product. So yeah, it says helps reduce inflammation, but it's not going to have more science on the can, obviously. But so I love it, and it's good. It was tasting. It's way better than the beet juice, in my opinion, and does different things. But now I know, like, okay, don't drink it every day because it tastes good, and you're like thinking it helps. Like I now know to wait until race week or something when it's going to benefit me more. So that was a really good question, Jared. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
Sweet. All right, then one more from Jared. We covered one of these already. He was asking about drinking versus eating greens, so we're gonna kind of skip over that one. But I do want to hit up his other question, which is, should I use a multivitamin? So basically, he wants to know, is it really helping? Is it an actual safety net, or am I just turning my urine neon colored for fun?
I'm glad I'm on this podcast because these are great questions I want to know.
Yeah, I feel bad because there were more questions, but in honesty, I think, from what we discussed pre-show, I think these were going to be the ones that would impact the most people listening. There's some that were very specific. And I always joke around. I always say only Sith deal in absolutes. If you're a Star Wars nerd, you'll pick that up.
Boom. Love it.
Never seen it.
Only Sith deal in
Don't make me go get my lightsaber.
But anyway, because a lot of products, a lot of things will make certain claims like this will always do this will always do that. I'm the kind of person that's going to say, hey, this is very likely to do this, or this will probably do this, but I'm not going to bet my license. I'm not going to bet my career on saying that it will. So, anyhow, so I try to make my answers specific enough to provide the education that someone needs, but also broad enough to, protect licensing, and then as well, so I don't get any angry emails like, you said that this wouldn't do this and it did this. I'm like, well, you know what? Out of 8 billion people on the planet, there's going to be one person that may not necessarily, be the outlier in that. There's going to be one person that doesn't necessarily affect that person the same as, 99.9% of the rest of the population. I mean, even if you look at research statistics, there's always a group of non-responders. There's always a small group of individuals who, for whatever reason, genetically, lifestyle, gender, et cetera, it just didn't apply to them. By the way, so multivitamin use. So in my experience, multivitamin can be a good tool, but it's not absolutely essential for everyone, especially if you're consuming a balanced diet that yields sufficient energy for weight maintenance or weight gain, because generally the athletes who prioritize their nutrition and are eating at maintenance or for weight gain are likely getting all of their micronutrient needs. And so in that circumstance, probably not needed. And a lot of research has demonstrated that there's not necessarily any performance or health benefit to exceeding those recommendations unless your diet is not providing the optimal amount of what you need. With that being said, there are some athletes who may see some benefit in this, and this may be those who are restricting intake for weight management. So if someone's restricting their energy intake by 10%, just generally speaking, that's 10% less nutrition they may theoretically be missing out on. Oftentimes when I work with an athlete on weight management program, I'm like, all right, well, we're going to be implementing more nutrient-dense foods to make sure you're getting your micronutrient needs during weight loss. But, we're humans. We make errors. Oftentimes, we're not going to eat our diet 100% as it's prescribed. There's going to be days where we're traveling. There's going to be days where it's holidays. There's going to be days where, for whatever reason, we can't get to the grocery store and make food. And on those days where, there's that, that minor window of, hey, I only got, 80, 90% of this need. How am I going to make up the extra 10%? Generally, your basic multivitamin can fill in that gap. So anyhow, those restricting weight may see benefit in it. Those who omit certain foods or food groups from their diet may also see benefit. So if anyone's, following a certain type of diet, let's say like vegetarian, for example, maybe you're not getting your B12. Under that circumstance, supplementing with multivitamin or a specific, nutrient in that circumstance would be advantageous. So that's another circumstance. And potentially those with an anatomical or physiological dysfunction causing a reduction in absorption. Some examples of that would be athletes with cystic fibrosis, gastric bypass, someone with inflammatory bowel. There's 100 different, dysfunctions that may cause limited absorption. So in those circumstances, hey, it's probably going to be your benefit to take in a little bit extra just to make sure you get that optimal absorption, get as much absorption as you can. And basically, if I were to give a verdict on this, some people, it gives them a clear conscience at night knowing that they took a multivitamin, or it's something that they did every day since they were a child. They took a multivitamin. I mean, you don't need the top tier $40 a month multivitamin. If your diet's in the right place, you can afford to get, the one-a-day men's, for a few bucks a month, and you're going to be okay. If you're one of the people in the categories that I kind of talked about, I would consider seeing your physician or registered dietitian for supplement recommendations, just not to give out blanket, diet advice, diet prescription randomly online. I would always suggest following up with a healthcare provider before pursuing that. And then talking a little bit about just if you were to take it, under what circumstance to take it, like how to take it. Oftentimes people take a multivitamin on an empty stomach with coffee in the morning, which is not necessarily the best guidelines for that, because some of the nutrients in that coffee may actually inhibit absorption of some of the nutrients inside that multivitamin. So I always encourage people to take a multivitamin with a well-rounded meal that does not include coffee or tea, but it should include a good fat source. That way you can optimize those fat-soluble vitamin consumption, so things like A, D, E, K. So let's say, for example, if you had a pasta dinner and you use some olive oil in that pasta and you put chicken breast in your sauce and you also put spinach and all that good stuff in your sauce and whatnot, whatever. So you have a pretty balanced meal that contains a good amount of nutrients that help facilitate the absorption. That's going to be the best practices for taking it.
Well, so to piggyback off this multivitamin question and like a kind of a personal reference, with you providing me nutrition and stuff, I do take a one-a-day vitamin. Is it something that you're, at this point, like if I'm finally on track and following what nutrition you're recommending, I might not need the multivitamin anymore? Or is there such a thing as like too much? I mean, if I'm taking the multivitamin still, but following your recommended nutrition, can I, like, is there overdoing it or like a bad? I mean, should I not be taking my multivitamin if I'm following what you're telling me is healthy and what my body needs?
That's a wonderful question. So in honesty, most of your vitamin and mineral supplements out there, well, let me say this, most of your multivitamin supplements out there are dosed that they won't really cause any toxicity issues. You're not going to reach toxicity with water soluble. So we're making the joke having colorful pee, having neon pee. If you've taken too much water soluble, you're essentially just going to excrete them. With the fat soluble vitamins, the toxicity range is relatively high. So you're likely not to reach that through a healthy diet and a multivitamin. You just won't really see any more benefit from overeating. But I will say if you take a specific, let's say, for example, I'm like, I'm trying to make those inflammation gains or reductions, whatnot. So I'm going to take a standalone vitamin E supplement, which is fat soluble, and you take like a butt ton of vitamin E, you're probably much more likely to reach that toxicity range because you're taking a specific one ingredient vitamin. But for just a multivitamin, that has one pretty standard size pill, you're going to be okay. Very rare. I can't say 100% of the time. I could say under most circumstances, you're going to be okay. And from what I've found, most of the athletes that I talk to that, are really serious about their diet, like I said, it might help them sleep a little bit better at night.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's just like, I mean, at some point, anything, whether it's good for you or not, too much of something good for you at some point is going to be bad for you, right? So, I mean, like you said, like if you take, too much vitamin E, at some point it's going to kind of like counteract what it's actually beneficial supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And if you look up like some of the side effects of like toxicity ranges of fat soluble vitamins, it's pretty crazy when you get closer to it. Like really weird stuff goes on in your body when you're getting that high in excess of anything. And like a lot of my job when I talk with clients is making them understand that it oftentimes it is the dose that makes the poison. Like I jokingly say that like let's say water, for example, you can get hyponatremia, or basically low blood concentration of sodium from over drinking water, water poisoning, things like that associated with drinking way too much water. And you can kill yourself by drinking too much water, but water is considered essential. But too much of something can definitely cause negative consequences.
Oh, and I think back to the very beginning, it's all about balance, like with the alcohol question, about balance, because I was talking to you, I brought up like pickles. I was like, because a cucumber is a vegetable, so where does a pickle fall on the like vegetable spectrum? And obviously there's sodium involved in the pickles, and you're kind of like, well, again, your sodium intake, you're going to hold water more, so it's like how much water, how much sodium, it's all a give and take and all in moderation. So it's just, it's crazy. You have to, you can do too much of one thing, you're going to be very healthy and take your vitamins, but then you're going to do too much of that and kind of counteract and negatively affect the other stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of balance. Even, I guess you could say it extends past diet. It's like a life philosophy, like keeping everything in balance. That's a good way to like, kind of connect the dots between a lot of people. Like let's say for exercise, I have someone who knows a lot about exercise and they come to me looking for diet and they're like, oh, well, you said that kale's awesome, so I'm going to eat kale every meal. I'm going to eat a pound of kale every meal. I'm like, well, kale is rich in a lot of nutrients, but it also contains some oxalates, which may limit absorption of other things. So, when we think about a strength training program, I kind of talk to them in a language that they're familiar with. I'm like, strength training. I'm like, all right, so you like squatting. Person A is like, yeah, I love squatting. I'm like, how many days a week do you squat? And they're like, maybe I squat one or 2 days a week. I was like, all right, cool. Well, do you think that it's conducive for your exercise program to squat 3 times a day, 7 days a week? And they're like, well, maybe not. I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't be eating, certain foods every meal, every day of the week.
That was a good example.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's it's been great, Luke. Ton of great information on this podcast. We're definitely going to do this again at some point during the year. We will definitely make an announcement both from the Strength and Speed Facebook page and from the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team Facebook page. So if anyone has any more questions when we record another with this episode, probably in about, I don't know, like 3 to 6 months from now, something like that. And we'll bring you on and have you answer a bunch more questions, because I think we're going to get a lot of positive feedback on this episode.
I just want to say like a kind of a personal testimony from someone with you and diet related and as an athlete who tried to perform based off like natural ability and talent of just being an athlete and someone that could do that, but had a terrible diet. I'm sure you see all kinds of diets, and I'd like to say and be honest that I had a terrible eating habits, but like reach out to someone, and this information right here helps a lot. But if you can and you feel that your diet's off, like get help, because I briefly earlier said that to add to his credentials, he's a magician, because I love food and I eat for things that taste good, but I've realized that, like I've done great in races, But just imagine to myself, like, if I actually got my diet in check, how much better I could be if I was eating to perform better. So that's why, Luke, I reached out to you. And the magician status is I love food, and I told him what my favorite things were, and he helped me eat healthy but still get like the flavor profile and the taste of what I want, so I can still eat something that tastes like cheesecake but like meet my nutrient needs. And it's awesome. And I recommend, whether Luke, they come to you for help, or someone else that has a background and knowledge in the science behind it, it helps. Like if you want to perform better, if you want to change your lifestyle, if you want to get in better eating habits to the point where I'm already, like I said, I'm sad. I don't want to drink my Dr. Pepper. I haven't eaten this bowl of candy on my table, and I haven't drank all the beer and alcohol in my fridge that I normally would have about a month ago. And so, personally, thank you to Luke for that, and I'm excited, and I hope others kind of listen to me or anybody else that, like, I had terrible eating habits. I binge drink, binge eat, sugar, candy. It's bad. But if you are dedicated and you have a passion for something, or if you want to be better or benefit your lifestyles or changes, put your mind to it. And again, whether mine's not a New Year's resolution, I just set out and was like, I need to make this change. And it's been, I think, maybe going on close to about a month, Luke, now. I'm about to come on maybe 4 weeks, that I've already seen awesome benefits. And all I want to do is just like share it with others. Like, oh my gosh, I was this person that had terrible stuff and I never thought I'd change, and I love it. So I'm not giving up drinking because I have a beer in my hand and I still eat bad, but because of what you've taught me, like, I know that this weekend I didn't go crazy. I went and had a healthy lunch today and was like, in moderation. I'm learning. So thank you.
You're doing great. And thank you for the kind words. I wish that I could put magic on my resume, but unfortunately it's not one of my skills, but I will take it. I will take it if referred to by others.
That's awesome. So, and I'll throw in that as someone who's been involved in fitness and, with my job, you have to take mandatory fitness tests, every couple of months. Over the years, especially when we were younger, it almost seemed like it didn't matter what you ate. You could just eat whatever. But you add up 3 years, 5 years, a decade of nutritional choices, and like the people who were consistently making, bad nutritional choices but were genetically gifted or maybe had a higher training volume when they were younger. Like I've just seen those people progressively gain weight and progressively get slower, progressively get weaker. While like I feel like I haven't made any significant gains. I've just been like really steady and really consistent for what most people consider a really long time. And it's kind of led me to where I am today in my kind of fitness journey. So just my 2 cents in there. And if you read my book, Strength and Speed's Guide to Elite Obstacle Course Racing, I actually put the nutrition part. It's like in one of the first 3 or 4 chapters, because I know when I was like first getting involved in fitness, one of the things I would do is like I'd read the book, and like the nutrition's always the last chapter in the book, and I always be like, yeah, whatever. I'm running a lot. I'll just eat whatever I want. It will be fine. And it's like, well, I mean, you could do that, but that's like, if you really want to perform at your best, that's really not the best way to go about things. So
I am biased, but I do agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
are we getting to the fun part now?
Yeah, we're getting to the fun part.
It's all fun.
So we're gonna close out the podcast. So we've got 3 people on. We'll do one thing you do not like. You tell something. Brenna, just take over.
Say you look at me. What is something that you look at me and you wouldn't know, or like it's everybody that knows me, give a little secret into your life. So we're gonna start with our guest. Put you on the spot.
Oh.
For those that know you or something kind of random, is there like what would be a random fact that you'd like to share that not everybody knows about you?
So I'll share a random fact that I think surprisingly very few people know about me. And honestly, there may only be like 2 or 3 people that know this about me.
Getting serious.
It's intense. So I refuse to wear bow ties. I hate bow ties. I look absolutely
Have you been
sick.
asked to wear a bow tie a lot?
Yeah.
That's a real deep. That's so personal. I feel like I'm like peering into your soul right now.
Like I wore a bow tie for one of my buddy's weddings. I was a groomsman, and that was the only time I have ever voluntarily worn a bow tie. I don't like anything about them. I think they make me look silly. I think
She's dying over here. She's dying over here. She's trying to like not laugh into the mic, but she's like turning red and in tears.
There's nothing I enjoy about bow ties. I don't think they look I don't think they look trendy. I don't think they look cool.
Who comes up with that as an issue? You feel like if you're a bow tie.
Oh, I am like so anti bow tie. It's not even funny.
I will say, like, the ones where you tie yourself, like an actual bow tie, not a clip-on, look like garbage every single time because no one can do it well. And like you kind of get it close, and you're like, yeah, this is good enough. And you just look like, I mean, you look like you're drunk already before the wedding has even started because your bow tie looks like hot garbage.
It's like on Pinterest.
I don't have such a strong hatred like you do, but I mean, I do think a tie looks more professional.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
I don't know, but bow ties have been kind of trendy now. Maybe that's why. Like, all the news reporters, like, it's cool to wear a bow tie now.
Wow.
I mean, like, I look at it's like Pinterest, expectation versus reality. Like, a bow tie, unless professionally done, never looks good. Like, never. And I mean, I'm not a fashionista. I don't, I'm nothing crazy. I usually stick to the grayscale for my colors. Like grayscale and very similar colors off of that, very neutral, very easy to match. But I mean, there's nothing that draws me to wear a bow tie, and I don't think I'm ever going to buy a bow tie, no matter how many times.
Here's a pro tip for if you need to dress up nice. Like when I had to buy a new suit, which I rarely do, I just went to like Express and I literally bought the outfit off the mannequin. I was like, just give me that, and like I swear,
a bow tie.
No, it didn't have a bow tie. And like I was actually working out of the embassy in Lebanon, and I got so many compliments on my outfit, and I was like, "You're damn right," because some professional picked it out for a mannequin, crushing it.
That's good advice.
So that's my pro tip for dressing nice.
No bow.
All right,
Oh, y'all are killing me.
Brenna, what do you got?
Nothing as good as that. I gotta come up with some good ones. I used up my really good one earlier today, but for today, so my nickname, a lot know me as Brenna Red Beast Calvert, and I do have red compression Marina tights. I have red and black Innovate shoes, red everything, red hair. But guess what? My favorite color is not red. Anybody got a guess?
It's got to be green.
No.
It should be
CTG.
green now. It should be green now.
Crap. I mean, yes. No. I will let everybody know in case you want to ever buy me anything in my favorite color. My favorite color is actually orange. And it's burnt orange, like the sunset, because
Which is
UT...
like red. It's like
no,
red.
it is not. University of Texas, burnt orange is like a brownish orange. That's red, and that's orange. I'm looking at my red cutting board versus the hummus sitting in front of Evan. Orange and red. Two totally different things. So yes, I'm Red Beast because I have red hair, and Garfield just came up with that, and now everything I have racing, it tends to be red. My kitchen, I actually have a red blender, a red microwave. It happened, but my favorite color is orange. So everybody, get it right, okay?
Burnt orange.
That's pretty
not any orange.
Evan, is yours as good as that?
You mentioned it earlier. You made a Star Wars reference in the podcast, and
nerd alert.
I love Star Wars. Like I saw when the new episode, episodes 1 and 2 came out. I saw them
8.
Yeah, well, I saw them opening night at midnight. Like we came into school on like 2 hours of sleep because I was still in high school when the first.
Did you wear a costume?
Episode 1. No, episode 1.
Wasn't it like the Star Wars
episode?
Like the 70s?
Oh my God, she doesn't know the episodes.
No, I don't.
I'm not going to explain this on the podcast because everyone should know this already. Anyway, where I was going with that is, so I have a pretty sweet lightsaber at my house. Brenna just fell out of her chair. It's like because I was like debating whether to buy it because it was expensive and like you're like, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? But it looks awesome, and my 4-year-old daughter loves it.
No, smidge.
So it is like, I like chase her around the house with it. It lights up. It makes noise. It's legit. Super awesome. This company called Ultra Sabers makes them. If anyone else wants to go like all nerd out.
My lightsaber for real. That beats my blanket and teddy bear. You have a lightsaber.
Yeah, I'll put an Instagram video on it when this posts or something because it's baller.
I need it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people don't want to admit it. They're like, this is the greatest purchase I've ever made. So
next pro team takeover event, Evan is bringing his lightsaber.
Sword fighting lesson.
You gotta go all in. I go all in on everything when it's something interests me. So, all right, that's gonna wrap up the podcast. Before we go, final shout outs. Luke, you want to give any family, friends, sponsors? How do people get in touch with you? How do people get signed up under your program?
Awesome. Shout out. So first one to my lovely fiance Liz, who is currently working at the hospital right now, doing the work that I am not willing to do. She's a BSN, a nurse, so kudos to her. She's a great support and always willing to be behind me in anything I choose to pursue, so thank you. Friends, family, all the love, of course, strength and speed. Always a pleasure working with our athletes and, of course, teammates and whatnot. Shout out to Cleveland Obstacle Racing Alliance, or COBRA, a great group of guys and gals up in Northeast Ohio. So if you're ever in the area, want to train, or if you're looking to join a group, I would encourage you to look into there. Of course, Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team. Look forward to working with you all. And if you want to get a hold of me, I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have Twitter, but I don't really check my Twitter. But
what's your Instagram? So I stopped tagging the wrong Luc Labonte, which I've done for over a year now.
That one dude is like, what? Yeah, that's inside scoop. He's been tagging like another Luc Labonte.
Some random Luc Labonte. He's been tagging like all my strength and speed posts.
It took me.
And like, yeah.
It took me like a year.
Stop tagging me.
I looked at his page and it like has like almost no posts. It's like one of those dudes who created a page and like is like, I don't.
So it's like the second strength and speed post because it's all tagged by you.
So.
Anyway, sorry. What's your Instagram handle?
If you want to get me through Instagram, it's L_squared_R. If you want to get me at Facebook, it is, well, you just Google search my name, Luc Labonte, or it is Facebook.com.
LUC, not LUKE like Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
No big deal.
I'm very French. I am exceedingly French. So you can find me at Facebook.com/LRLabonte. If you want to reach me through email, shoot me an email at labonterluke@gmail.com. If you're interested in any services, just reach out. I'll tell you the next step. There's paperwork involved, confidentiality, all that good stuff. But anyhow, that is me.
Awesome. Well, my shout out, I mean, it's a perfect episode. My shout out is to you. Because like I said, I kind of started working with you based off from mainly we're teammates, strength and speed teammates, and had heard you on podcast with Evan. I looked to Evan for recommendations, and I trust his expertise, and you were one of the people, I made a post on Facebook like, who uses who for nutrition information or meal prep, and all these people came up with stuff, and your name was mentioned. I was like, wait, that's like a teammate. Let me go with someone that I feel comfortable with. And thank you for everything you've done, and I'm excited that like me working with you, I think it's going to be great for the pro team, because I think a lot of us need that help. And again, I think everybody, whether they admit it or not, might need some nutritional help. So I've got it, and thank you, because I've already felt improvement. So yeah, I'm excited to see what 2019 holds, and I will give a lot of credit to my new magician friend.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Just head over to the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team Facebook page. We have a lot of new sponsors. Well, I don't say a lot. We have several new sponsors coming on for 2019. So just head over there. There's definitely going to be some stuff you want to get involved in. Not only Luke, but some training stuff like that. So check it out. That's about all we got. We will catch all you later. Thanks again, Luke, for coming on.
Yep, no problem. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time.